The inspector's truck pulled up to the curb at 7:40 in the morning on a Thursday in September, and I watched from my kitchen window with the specific calm of someone who has been waiting for exactly this and has prepared for exactly this and knows precisely how the next several hours are going to go. I had my coffee. I had my folder on the kitchen table. I had my attorney on standby. I had made this appointment myself 3 weeks earlier because I had known since the day I found the encroachment that eventually the city was going to need to be involved, and I had decided it was going to be on my terms and on my timeline and not on anyone else's. The inspector's name was Carl Benton, and he worked for the Lake Havasu City Building Department in Arizona. He was a methodical man in his late 50s with a measuring wheel and a clipboard and the unhurried manner of someone who has been doing inspections long enough to know that what he finds is usually more interesting than what he was told he would find. He knocked on my front door. I opened it. I said good morning and offered him coffee, which he declined, and I said, "Let me show you what I called about," and I walked him around the side of my house to my back property line. The pump station was there, exactly as it had been for the past 8 months. A concrete block enclosure about 8 feet by 12 feet, housing the circulation pump, filtration equipment, and chemical dosing systems for the Saguaro Hills Community Pool, which was the HOA's community amenity and which was located in the common area approximately 40 feet to the east of my back fence. The enclosure had a metal door, ventilation louvers on 2 sides, conduit running in from the utility connection, and a low, constant hum that I had been hearing through my bedroom wall every night for 8 months. It was also, according to my survey, approximately 3 feet and 4 inches inside my property line. Carl Benton looked at it. He measured the distance from my back fence to the enclosure. He measured the enclosure itself. He walked around it. He checked the conduit entry point and looked at the roof. He wrote things on his clipboard without saying much. Then he looked at me. He said, "Do you have a copy of your survey?" I had 3 copies of my survey in the folder I had brought outside with me. I gave him one. He looked at it for a moment. He looked at the enclosure. He looked at the survey again. He said, "And you say you didn't authorize this structure?" I said I did not authorize it. I was not consulted, not notified, and not present when it was built. I discovered it when I came back from a 7-month work assignment. He wrote more things on his clipboard. He said, "Do you know when it was built?" I said, based on my neighbor's account and the construction photos I obtained, it was built approximately 11 months ago, 8 months before I came back. He wrote more things. Then he said, "I'm going to need to pull the permit history on this address." I said, "I have already pulled it. I have a copy of the permit search results here. There is no building permit on record for this structure at my address or at the adjacent common area address." He looked at the papers I handed him. His expression did not change dramatically, but something in it settled, the way an inspector's expression settles when he has confirmed something he already suspected. He said, "Who owns the common area?" I said, "The Saguaro Hills HOA. The contact information for their property management company is in the folder." He took the paper with the contact information. He said he would be in touch and that I should expect a formal notice from the building department within 5 to 7 business days. I thanked him for coming. He drove away. I went back inside and called my attorney. My name is Priya Chandrasekharen. I am 42 years old and I am a senior project manager for a civil infrastructure firm that operates across the Southwest United States. I have lived in Lake Havasu City, Arizona for 6 years, and I bought my house at 4 Ironwood Drive in the Saguaro Hills community because it was on the quieter western edge of the neighborhood, had good desert landscaping that required minimal water, and had a back property line that gave me views of the natural desert preserve beyond the community. I valued that back view. I had specifically chosen this lot over 2 others because of it. I work long stretches away from home. The nature of my job involves being on site for infrastructure projects that can run for months at a time, and I had an arrangement with a property management service that checked on my house monthly and handled anything that came up. When I left for a project in Utah in December of the previous year, my house was exactly as I had left it. The back property line was clear. The desert view was intact. When I came back in July, there was a concrete block building behind my fence. I stood in my backyard the afternoon I came home and looked at it for a long time. Then I looked at my surveyed boundary markers, which were still in place. Then I walked the distance from the enclosure to the markers with my own measuring tape. The enclosure was on my property, not ambiguously, not marginally, 3 feet and 4 inches inside my legal boundary. I called my property management service. They told me the construction had happened in February and March. They had not reported it to me because they had not identified it as an issue. The construction was on the other side of my back fence, and they had not gone into the backyard during their monthly checks for those months because there was nothing inside the fence requiring attention. I did not blame them excessively because the fence had obscured the enclosure from a casual pass through the side gate, and they were not surveyors and had not measured from the property line. I updated their instructions going forward and moved on. I pulled my deed. I pulled my survey. I took photographs with surveying stakes visible in the frame. I did an online search of Saguaro Hills HOA meeting minutes, which were posted publicly on their community website, and I found a reference in the November minutes, 2 months before I had left for Utah, to a capital improvement project for community pool infrastructure upgrade, with a budget approved of $140,000. There was no mention in those minutes of any easement, any land acquisition, any negotiation with adjacent property owners. The project had been approved as if the question of where the pump station would go was already settled, which meant either they had already arranged for the land or they had assumed they did not need to. They had assumed they did not need to. I had done enough infrastructure work in my career to recognize what had happened. Someone in the planning process had looked at the site plan, seen that the available space in the common area for the pump station was constrained by existing structures and landscaping, looked at the adjacent residential lot on the west side, seen what appeared on a preliminary or approximate basis to be sufficient space, and proceeded on the assumption that the property line was where it appeared to be on a casual reading of an older site map. Nobody had commissioned a current survey. Nobody had verified the exact boundary. Nobody had contacted me. In infrastructure project management, this kind of assumption is what I spend my career preventing. It is how a project ends up in the worst kind of trouble, the kind where you have already built something and then you find out you built it in the wrong place. My attorney was a woman named Rebecca Cho. Yes, the same Rebecca from the pool party story. Patricia Home handles the Midwest. Rebecca handles the Southwest. They are both excellent at what they do. I had worked with Rebecca on a property easement matter 2 years earlier, and I had her number ready. I called her the day I discovered the encroachment. She came to the property the following week, measured everything herself, reviewed my survey and deed, and gave me her assessment. The encroachment was clear and well documented. The lack of a building permit added a code violation on top of the property encroachment, which meant I had 2 separate legal levers rather than one. The HOA had built an unpermitted structure on my land. Both of those things were independently actionable. She said I had 3 main options. I could demand removal and restoration of my property to its original condition. I could negotiate an easement sale, selling them the right to use that portion of my land for the pump station at a price I found acceptable. Or I could pursue damages for the unauthorized use and demand retroactive compensation. She recommended starting with documentation, then the building department, then a formal demand letter in that order. She said the building department involvement was valuable because it established a third-party finding of the code violation that was not dependent on my word against theirs. I had spent 3 weeks after Rebecca's visit preparing the documentation and making the inspector appointment. I had the folder, I had the survey, I had the permit search results, I had the HOA meeting minutes, I had photographs, I had Rebecca's formal legal assessment in writing. The inspector's visit was the third step. The HOA property management company, a firm called Desert Community Management, Received the building department's formal notice of violation 6 days after Carl Benton's visit. The notice cited construction of a permanent structure without a building permit on a residential lot. It required a response within 30 days, either a permit application to retroactively permit the structure if that was possible, or a removal plan. They called me that same day. The property manager was a woman named Gail Preston who had a professional phone manner that indicated she dealt with problems regularly and had developed the habit of being controlled about them. She said she was calling to discuss a matter related to my property, and she was sure we could find a way to work together on a solution. I said, "I have an attorney. Please direct all communication to Rebecca Cho's office." She said, "Of course. I was just hoping to have a brief, initial conversation." I said, "Rebecca's contact information is on the formal survey notice I sent you 3 weeks ago. I look forward to hearing from your legal representative." I ended the call. Rebecca had told me to do exactly that if they called directly. She wanted everything in writing and everything through attorneys so that nothing I said in a casual phone conversation could be recharacterized later. Desert Community Management's attorney, a man named Philip Ware, contacted Rebecca within 2 days. His opening position was what I had expected. The HOA had acted in good faith based on their understanding of the property boundary. The pump stations served the community, and they were hoping to work out a reasonable accommodation. Rebecca's response was equally expected. Good faith did not authorize construction on private property. The code violation was a matter of public record, and my client's position would be determined by the terms of any resolution, not by the HOA's characterization of their intent. Philip asked what my position was. Rebecca had discussed this with me carefully before the attorneys started talking. What did I actually want? There were several possible outcomes, and I needed to think about them clearly before I was in a negotiation. Option 1 was removal. Make them take the pump station down, remove the concrete, restore my property to its original grade and condition. This was my strongest legal position and my clearest right. But a pump station removal meant the HOA's community pool had no working circulation system until they built a replacement somewhere else, which meant the pool would be down for months, and the HOA membership, who had paid for the capital improvement, would be affected. That was not my problem legally, but I was realistic enough to know that courts in Arizona sometimes considered practical impacts in equity cases, and that a removal order might face some resistance. Option 2 was an easement sale. Let them keep the pump station in exchange for payment at a rate I found acceptable. This was cleaner in some ways. It resolved everything permanently and compensated me for the land use. But it meant a concrete block building sat permanently behind my fence, blocking my desert view, and the payment would need to be significant to compensate me for that ongoing loss. Option 3 was a temporary licensed use agreement with a hard end date, during which they operated the existing pump station while building a replacement on land they actually owned, at which point they would remove the encroaching structure and restore my property. I thought about these options for 3 days. I walked my backyard every evening. I looked at the concrete block enclosure, and I looked past it at what I could see of the desert through the ventilation louvers, and I thought about what I had bought this house for. I told Rebecca, Option 3 with conditions. Part 2. Rebecca presented my terms to Philip Ware in a formal letter that I reviewed before she sent it. The terms were specific and detailed because I had learned enough from being a project manager to know that vague terms produce vague outcomes. The HOA would be granted a temporary licensed use of the encroaching portion of my property, specifically the 3-foot 4-inch strip running the width of the pump station, for a period of 24 months. During that period, the existing pump station could remain operational. In exchange for this license, the HOA would pay me a monthly license fee calculated at the commercial land use rate for the area, which Rebecca had researched, and which came out to approximately $900 per month. The HOA would also pay my legal fees to date, which were documented, and came to approximately $12,000. And the HOA would provide, within 60 days, a binding construction plan and timeline for relocating the pump station to a location entirely within the HOA's common area property, with a performance bond to ensure completion. At the end of the 24 months, the pump station on my property would be removed at the HOA's expense, all concrete and equipment hauled away, and the land would be restored to its original grade, reseeded with desert-appropriate vegetation matching the existing condition, and inspected by a licensed surveyor confirming the complete removal of all encroaching structures. If the HOA failed to complete the relocation and removal within 24 months, the license fee would increase by 50% per month for each month of delay, and I would have the right to demand immediate removal at their expense with no further negotiation. Philip took 8 days to respond. The counter was a longer license period, 36 months, and a lower monthly fee. Rebecca countered at 24 months, and the original fee with the performance bond amount increased. They came back with 28 months and a slightly lower fee. Rebecca said 24 months, original fee, original bond. They accepted. The signed agreement was executed, notarized, and recorded with the county within 2 weeks. The performance bond was posted. The first license fee payment arrived on the 1st of the following month. Over the following 8 months, I watched the HOA work on the relocation project from a careful distance. I was not involved in it and did not want to be, but I tracked the permit applications through the Public Building Department records, because building permits in Lake Havasu City are public documents, and you can see when they are applied for, when they are approved, and when inspections are completed. The HOA pulled a permit for a new pump station building in the northern corner of the common area, away from any residential property lines, in month 4 of the agreement. The permit was properly applied for and properly issued, which told me they had learned something from the first time. Construction on the new station started in month 7. I watched the progress from my backyard. Sometimes you could see the common area from certain angles over the top of the fence. The new building went up correctly within the common area, with inspections at each stage. In month 16, the new pump station was operational. The circulation system was transferred to the new location. The old encroaching pump station was decommissioned. Demolition of the old station began in month 18, 6 months ahead of the deadline. They did not wait until month 24. I think the monthly license fee and the performance bond created exactly the kind of incentive structure I had intended them to create. The demolition crew was professional and thorough. They removed the concrete block walls, the slab, the equipment pads, the conduit stubs, and all associated materials. The restoration crew followed immediately behind them, excavating the old slab area, bringing in native soil to match the surrounding grade, and replanting with the desert vegetation that had been documented in the pre-construction photos I had taken the day I came home. Carl Benton from the building department came out for the final inspection. He walked the area with his measuring wheel. He verified the complete removal of all encroaching structures. He looked at the restored vegetation. He measured from the property boundary markers to confirm nothing remained within my property line. He signed off on the final inspection. I had an independent licensed surveyor, different from the one I had used for documentation, confirm the boundary and the complete restoration. His report said the same thing Carl Benton's inspection said. My back property line was clear. The desert view was intact. I stood in my backyard on the afternoon after the final inspection and looked at the back property line and at the common area beyond and at the desert preserve in the distance, and I let myself have a moment of the particular satisfaction that comes when something is fully resolved, not partially, not approximately, but completely. The license fee payments I had received totaled approximately $16,200 over 18 months. Combined with the $12,000 in legal fee reimbursement, I had been compensated for the disruption in a material way. The total was not what I had lost in terms of the view and the piece of the back property for over a year and a half, but it was something real, and it was documented, and it was what the process had produced. Rebecca called me after the final inspection to close out the file. She said, in the way that good attorneys say things when a case has gone completely according to plan, the bond was the right call. If you had not required the performance bond, they would have found reasons to extend. I said, I've managed enough construction projects to know what happens when there is no consequence for delay. She said, you handled this like a project manager. I said, that's what I am. She said, it shows. The Saguaro Hills HOA held its annual meeting 3 months after the final restoration. I attended. I had attended one HOA meeting in 6 years of living there, and this was my second. The board presented the completed pool infrastructure project as a success, noting that the new pump station was fully operational and that the prior encroachment issue had been resolved through negotiation. They did not go into details. Several residents who had been at the previous year's meetings and knew that the pool had been down for portions of the prior summer due to the permit issues asked questions about what had happened. The board president, a man named Richard Falk, who had been in the position for 2 years and who had not been on the board when the original capital improvement was approved, answered the questions carefully and honestly. He said the prior pump station was built in a location that turned out to encroach on a neighbor's property. That was a mistake that should not have happened and that cost the community significant money to correct. We have revised our procedures for capital improvement projects to require independent surveys of any construction site before work begins. One of the residents asked how much the correction had cost. Richard said, without flinching, approximately $60,000, including legal fees, relocation construction, and the licensed use payments to the affected property owner. The room was quiet for a moment. Then someone in the back said, $60,000 because nobody checked the survey. Richard said, that's correct. The room had the quality of a room absorbing information that is both surprising and, on reflection, entirely logical. I did not speak during the meeting. I sat in the 3rd row and listened, and afterwards I went home. My backyard is quiet now in the evenings. The desert is visible past the common area in the long flat way that desert is visible in Lake Havasu, that sense of distance that feels like the land is making room for you. The back property line is marked and clear. The restoration vegetation has started to fill in, the brittle bush and the desert marigold that the restoration crew planted, establishing themselves in the September rains. The pump station's hum is gone from my bedroom wall. I did not realize how much I had internalized it until it was absent. The first night after the demolition, I woke up at 3 in the morning in the particular silence of a house that has changed and lay there for a moment listening to it before I understood why it was different. Quiet, just quiet. I worked on an infrastructure project once in Nevada where we discovered a utility line 12 feet from where the original survey said it was. 12 feet, not quite 1 lane of a standard road. It delayed the project by 4 months and cost the client approximately $2 million to reroute. The root cause was a single survey that had been used for preliminary planning and then accepted as definitive without verification. Nobody checked the survey. In infrastructure work, in property development, in any project that involves physical space and legal boundaries, the survey is the foundation. Everything else sits on it. When the survey is wrong or unverified or not done, everything built on that foundation is at risk. It does not matter how much you spend on the structure. It does not matter how good the construction is. If the boundary is wrong, the building is in the wrong place, and no amount of good faith resolves that. The Saguaro Hills HOA's new capital improvement procedure now requires an independent license survey before any construction project begins. The change was 1 line in a policy document. It cost nothing to implement. It will save the community from ever spending $60,000 correcting a mistake that a $500 survey would have prevented. I submitted a copy of my documentation, the survey, the photos, the permit violation notice, the licensed use agreement, to the Arizona HOA Regulatory Office as a case study in encroachment prevention. They accepted it and included a summary in their annual guidance document for HOA boards on capital improvement planning. My attorney's name and mine are in the acknowledgements. It is a small thing, but someone in another community will read that guidance document before they start building a pump station, and they will commission the survey first, and they will find out where the property line actually is before they pour the concrete. That is a better outcome than $60,000 and 18 months of a pump station humming through a bedroom wall.